Okay, in today's video we're going to take a look at a scene file from someone from one of the Cinema 4D forums. Over on Reddit we've got this post from Gus Meyer, and this is basically his first proper shot at doing a 3D scene after doing some tutorials, and he's just generally looking for some help on how to get it looking better. So it's essentially this car going along some looks like sort of mainland European roads. He sent me some reference here. This is sort of what he's aiming at. So he's got these shots of a sort of small winding, looks like Lisbon, there we go. So yeah, a small sort of single track roads, stones at the edge, bit of ivy growing up on the walls, and he just wants a car driving down there. So we're going to take a look at his scene, see what we can do, see what we can fix, see what we can improve, and hopefully this will help some other people who are sort of in this kind of situation, just trying to work out how to get the scenes looking better. So let's get that out of the way. Let's lose the web browser and let's load in his scene file. So let's see what we get here. Loading. Okay, right. Let's turn this camera off, have a look around the scene, see where we are. So we've got this big old chunk of road, that's fine. And I'm guessing this is where all the renders were generally done from, this bit with the walls and the ivy. So let's see. Right, okay, so it's an animation. Right, so we'll skip the animation side of things for now. We'll just concentrate on trying to get a nice looking image. So let's skip the animation forward until the car's kind of in place. Okay, let's say about there will do. Right, so let's see what's going on. Let's see what's wrong with the scene, see how we can improve it. And the first thing I'm going to say is, what's going on with this car? It looks very odd. The shading is quite peculiar on it. Now, when I see something like this, the first thing I think is, we've got some normal issues. If certain parts of the car are shaded okay, but then all of a sudden another part just has really strange, peculiar shading, this is usually because cinema's getting confused about the front and the back of a polygon. So let's see. What's going to be the Renault Clio, I guess, which seems to have a million textures applied. But okay, that's fine. That's the kind of thing you tend to get when you download ready-made models from the internet. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the normals. I'm going to see which way all the polygons on this object are actually facing to see if that's the issue. So I'm going to turn the textures off so that all this red and green doesn't interfere with what we see. So options, textures, let's just disable this. And on the Renault Clio, I'm going to go over to my left and choose polygon mode. And I'm just going to select everything. Right, no, actually that looks perfectly fine. What you sometimes see on a model is certain areas, they end up looking, if I just reverse this surface temporarily, sometimes you see these random patches of blue, and this tells you that those polygons are backwards, and that's what I was expecting to find. However, everything's all nice and orange, so that is actually not the problem. So it must be something else. So let's have a look at the object. We've got an align to spline tag, so that's what's causing it to animate. We've then got loads of materials, that's all okay, most likely. These are selection tags, so these materials are restricted to certain polygons. And, there we go, right, this. Let me just get some larger icons for you. Large icons, okay. When you load in ready-made models, sometimes the person who's made the file, or at least the software they've used to make the file, is trying to tell all the other software how it should shade the model. And reasonably often this goes wrong. It just goes completely wrong, and the shading on the object just ends up looking like complete and total trash. That information is stored in this little brown tag. This is a normal tag. Normals is the fancy technical name for which way the polygon faces. And to be honest, the easiest thing to fix in most cases like this is actually just to delete it and let cinema work things out for itself. So if I choose this and hit delete, there we go, boom, fixed. So whatever that software which made this file was doing, it made a complete mess of it. So let's delete that normal tag. That will clean the surface up. I think we'll probably turn our textures back on again now, to be honest. So options and textures. Okay, and actually I did just notice something there. Right, enhanced OpenGL. This is a setting which should generally be turned on. And the only time you tend to find it's turned off is if someone has pressed a button when they didn't know what it does. Maybe this guy did that. Or if you load a really, really old project. And another good way of telling that, so this should be turned on. By the way, in case you're wondering what it does, it just generally improves the visual quality. It lets you see reflections and shadows and ambient occlusion in real time. But another good way to tell whether this is the case is to go into the project settings. And there's another setting. Yeah, there we go. Right, linear workflow. This setting, again, should be turned on. And the fact that it's turned off tells me that this is a really old project. So either the guy who's using this software has a really, really old copy of Cinema, or he's started from a very old project. And if I just quickly look at the information. Okay, so it seems Gus is working in version 16. It's not the latest, but it's perfectly fine. And that's not the issue. So I'm going to go ahead and take a guess. My guess is that Gus has downloaded this Renault Clio model from the internet. The file is either very, very old, or the software is saved from just has really bad settings. And I bet he's loaded the car and then built the rest of the scene around this, which means this whole project, this whole Cinema 4D file, will have lots of really weird settings. So linear workflow is turned off, which means everything will just look bad. I'm not going to get into the details, but if this is turned off, everything looks rubbish. So let's go ahead and turn this on. This will now make all materials re-render, and the colors will become less saturated and heavy. So when we look at Gus's renders, do you notice how the red is really deep saturated red, and the green on the plants is a really deep, heavy saturated green, and there's all this black. That's partially because of this linear color workflow. This should be turned on. I'll tell you what, let's also go ahead and turn on our enhanced OpenGL because it makes the editor look nicer. You can suddenly see reflections and shadows and that sort of thing. Okay, so those would be the two worst offenders. And you may also have noticed, if you were paying attention, all these materials down here which look really sort of dark and dingy and not very bright. Linear workflow also, let it re-render, it also brightens those up. So it just makes everything look a bit nicer. Anyway, that's I think the worst bits in the scene taken care of. Let's have a look at how we can just generally make it look a bit nicer. So what do we have? A camera which wasn't really facing anywhere, so I'm just going to lose that for now. A sky. Okay, so this is a physical sky. We're talking about one of these. It's a built-in cinema-generated sky, so it automatically adds lights and shadow, and it adds sort of a horizon, a bit of colour to the sky. The problem is it never really looks that good. It's not a particularly nice-looking thing. You can have a much better rendering, at least when you're starting out, just simply using a panoramic image. So what I will do is I'm going to lose this computer-generated sky, and I'm just going to replace it with a photo because it just makes it easier. It makes it more controllable. There's no longer all these dozens and dozens of settings for you to worry about. So let's lose the sky. It's just a bit complicated for very little benefit. And let's add in. So we're not going to use a physical sky. We're going to use a sky. And that is just a great big sphere which wraps around the project. The idea of this is that I can now come down to my materials and make a new material. Open it up. And I'll call this thing sky, just so we can keep track. And all I'm going to do is simply load in a HDRI image. Now, if you've never come across these, for the most part, they are these nice, big, panoramic photos. They just wrap around 360 degrees, and they're great for wrapping around 3D scenes because they give you nice reflections and nice lighting. So I've got quite a few here. Where should we put it? I'll tell you what, one which always works well, and you should generally find this in Cinema's content browser if you go have a look inside. This is the industrial estate. It's not particularly high res, it's not particularly detailed, but it does have a nice sky, it's got a bit of cloud, it's got a nice bright sun, it's got a few buildings in there. And if I put that sky image onto my sky, that will now wrap this photograph all the way around. So you can see there's a great big dirty motorbike and a great big dirty red car over there, but so long as we get the angles right and we don't sort of look over there, then it'll be fine. So let's sort of pick an angle for all this. So let's say I want my rendering kind of over here. So we've got a bit of wall in the background, something in the foreground. The car's nice and visible. What I would do is I would rotate the sky until the stuff in the background I don't want to see can't be seen. If it's a bit hard to see, because it's all pixelated, open the material up, come down to your editor settings, and where it says texture preview size, bump this up to sort of 1 or 2,000. This will now show you much more detail in the background. It doesn't affect the rendering, but it means I can see what I'm looking at a bit more clearly. So just before I do this, I'm going to add a camera, because I like the shot, I like the framing, I think it looks decent. So I'm going to add a camera object, and that just means I can get back to that view when I need to for the rendering. But for now I'm going to zoom out. So what I don't want is this great big dirty factory in the background. So I'm just going to rotate the sky and spin it around until I just have a bit of clear blue sky or just a bit of trees over there. So if I look through my camera again, and feel free, by the way, to actually tilt the sky backwards and forwards. You don't just have to spin it around in the sort of compass direction. You can actually tilt it. So if I don't want to see this factory over there, I am happy to just tilt the entire sky backwards. And that's it. That'll do fine. So I've got a bit of a tree, a bit of sky. That'll do me fine. I think I'm fairly happy with that. And plus, by the way, do keep in mind, watch what it does to your reflections. You will see these reflections swirling around. For Gus, not in version 16, I'm afraid. You will need to update to get proper, decent reflections. But I can in version 19, or maybe 18 as well. I can turn the sky and sort of watch what it does to my reflection. So I can sort of stop when that just looks sort of quite decent, when I like what's going on. So maybe I'll tilt it back a little bit further. So I'm sort of balancing what I see here with what I see in the reflections as well. So let's stop about there. I think that should do. Right. We can always come back and tweak it. Let's not mess around with that for too long. Anyway, let's improve our materials. So I'm not going to delve into the modelling too much. It seems it's predominantly ready-made models, so ready-made car, ready-made ivy growing on a wall, and the rest is just cubes. So I'll leave the modelling for something else. But we can improve the material so it looks nicer. But first, let's give ourselves a quick render. Let's just see what we get. Render, render, render. Okay. So right, let's start off with this green stuff in the background. It seems that we have no texture on this. It's just, if we scroll through down here, there we are. It's just going to be this plain green material. So let's try and get it looking a bit more realistic. Let's put some texture on there. Now what I suspect is with most of these downloaded models, they will sometimes lose their textures or they just get lost in translation somewhere. But what that means is we may have decent mapping for it. So this green material, I'm guessing this green is for the ivy. Let's just tweak the colour, see if it changes. Yep, good. Okay. So what I'm guessing is that maybe if we can find this ivy model, this, okay, let's have a look. Okay, you see all these checkerboards? This is UV data. This tells Cinema how materials should be applied to the surface. Now again, sometimes they go wrong and they just don't really work, but sometimes they're quite useful. So what I'm hoping is if I take this texture and I just quickly replace in maybe something like a checkerboard, just to see what it does. So I'm just going to choose checkerboard. Right. So we've got this 2x2 checkerboard, a bit of Battenberg cake. But you can see on the leaves, it's actually quite nicely mapping that checkerboard onto the surface. So I'm hoping if I put in a picture of a leaf, the leaf will more or less already be in the correct place. So if I swap out the checkerboard with a leaf, so let's see, pictures, textures. So this is just stuff I've got laying around. If you're after a good place to get some of this stuff from, by the way, then go to, let's get a new tab, go to textures.com. Get an account, it's all free, but you'll find tons of stuff in here. So if you go to nature, let's see, leaves, you can go find yourself a nice leaf texture in here and apply this onto your ivy. So I'm just going to go to my textures, and I've already got a leaf laying around. This will do. Load it in. Nope, don't copy it. Right, so this has placed my leaf texture onto each and every leaf. Obviously, we've got a whole bunch of white around the outside, and I think, yeah, the leaf is facing the wrong way. So you could edit this in Photoshop and turn the leaf 90 degrees and crop it in and cut out the outside edge. That might be one way of doing it. I'm going to be a bit lazy, and I'm just going to try and stay within Cinema. So let's see. First things first, I'm going to try and rotate the leaf. Now, Cinema, unfortunately, doesn't have a simple rotation option. I cannot just simply turn my image 90 degrees. Well, I can, but I've got to do it in a bit of a weird way. So this leaf, if you go to this pull-down menu and you choose the layer shader, this is what you'd normally use for layering up lots and lots of images on top of each other. But one weird ability it has, so choose layer, click on the word layer. So this is where you'd normally layer things up a bit like Photoshop. But the reason I do this is because within here, under Effects, there is the option to transform a layer, which basically means move, scale, and rotate. So if I transform my leaf, let's just select it, transform. In here, I can move, scale, and rotate. So basically angle 90 degrees. This will now turn the artwork, and my leaf is now facing in the correct direction. So it's just saved me a trip to Photoshop and a bit of loading and saving. But the other thing is it's still far too small. This leaf texture does not fit these leaf models. So what I'm planning on doing with this, so it's this one here. So it's got a couple of copies on there. We can do them both at the same time. That's fine. In fact, to tell you what, let's pick all 3 copies here. Just Control-click to select all of these. If I have a play around with the length in U and V, this is basically horizontal and vertical. If I scale this up, I can stretch how big that leaf is. Offset, by the way, moves it back and forth. So as it gets bigger, it might fall off the object. You can offset it to actually sort of put it back again. So if I stretch it sideways, and with length V, if I stretch it sort of vertically, and then offset it to put it back on the leaf, I can, bingo, there we go. So it's probably not the right kind of leaf, but you know what, from a distance, there's a point where we just don't care. So that's the leaf on the ivy done. That should now look much, much nicer. Let's have a look. Right, okay. So he has clearly copied and pasted this ivy object several times. So just for future reference, don't copy and paste it. Select your ivy and use an instance. If you had done this, then when I improve my first bit of ivy, all of my other copies will also improve at the same time. So for future reference, use instances rather than copy and paste. So I will just quickly go ahead and fix this. So let's see, null plants wall. So we've got 3 copies on this bit of ivy. I'm guessing over here. Yeah, okay, so he's clearly duplicated this wall object, which includes the ivy. So we've fixed this one. So if I open up this other bit of wall, yeah, okay, so there's 3 old textures all in the wrong place. I'm just going to delete those 2 and duplicate these. So Control drag, you can copy that texture over. And that will have fixed those bits. And I'm guessing if we do the same thing here, so let's delete this texture and copy over this one. And I'm guessing we've got another bit of ivy here. Yep, there we go, all one. More ivy. So let's delete the old ivy textures and copy over our new fixed improved ones. Control drag, copy them over. Good, right. So that's that ivy. That's that ivy. So that's all looking nicer. Now let's have a look at the car itself. Material-wise, let's go for the big elephant in the room. Let's go for the car paint. So I'm just going to give myself a little bit more space down here. Well, actually, can I find it? Red glass, orange glass, and car paint. I'm going to guess this is it. Oh, by the way, what I will do, just to clean this up a bit, is I will go to Functions, and it's probably going to be a bit off the screen, but there is an option in here called, where's it gone? Remove unused materials. So I can't show you it because it's a bit too far down, but if you go to Functions, Remove Unused, that will just clear out any textures the project doesn't need. Right, so here's our car paint. Let's open this guy up. Let's have a look. So, yeah, this is a side effect of loading in ready-made models. Again, depending where this car came from, sometimes the software will turn on luminance and transparency and this rubbish environment channel, which we don't really want anymore, which just completely and utterly ruins the textures. And what I'd suggest, rather than trying to fix this, because they could have this other software could have dialed in all sorts of weird things and all sorts of weird settings. I'm not going to try and fix this material. It's quicker to just make a new fresh one from scratch and replace it. So I'm going to make a new material. It does unfortunately stick it at the very top of the list, but don't worry. So here's our new material. So this is going to be the new car paint. Let's just do a red car paint, a nice simple one, and then we can replace it. So colour, well, this is the easy bit. Choose a colour. Let's go for a nice strong red. That should do nicely. And the key thing really with the car paint is getting the reflections right. So let's go down to reflectance. One bit of advice, you might have heard me say this a few times before in other videos, always get rid of this specular. Specular is this naff, soft, rubbery sheen you see stuck on the top of the material surface, and the car paint does not have a rubbery soft finish. So where this thing says default specular, just hit delete, hit remove. That gets rid of that. And now we're going to put in a proper, decent reflection. So click on add. And if you're ever lost and not sure what to choose from this list of scary words, just go for the first one. A Beckman reflection is very standard and normal. You can use it for pretty much anything. So let's just go for Beckman because it's nice and simple. And the first thing this does is it turns it into chrome. What we've got to do is either tone back how strong the reflection is or restrict where it goes. And I'm going to go for the second one because it gives you more realistic results. We're going to use something called Fresnel. Down here, layer Fresnel or Fresnel. Open this up, have a look at the settings. In a nutshell, Fresnel is the ability to fade out a texture when an object curves around. So, really short version. Here's my phone. When you look at an object head on, it will only have a little bit of reflection. But when you look at it at an angle and your view just glances off the object, it becomes much shinier and much more reflective. And that is pretty much what Fresnel does. So we're going to use this for our car paint because it makes it look nicer. So down here, under Fresnel, first thing we have to do is choose what type. Well, if an object can conduct heat and electricity, i.e. it's made of metal, it's a conductor. If it's something else, just choose dielectric. So this is really just a metal or other option. So car paint is not metal, so it's dielectric. And immediately what we will get is our colour back. And now you just get this nice, soft, glossy material reflection around the outside edge. And that's it. That's all you really, truly need to do. We can have a play around with some roughness. Maybe the car paint isn't perfect and it's got a little bit of roughness to it. So maybe 2, 3, 4%. Just a little bit of imperfection. You won't really see much change here, but it does affect the actual rendering quite a bit. And for a basic car paint, that's it. You can go much further with this, adding extra layers for metallic flakes and clear lacquers over the top. But for someone who's just starting out in Cinema 4D, who just wants a nice bit of red car paint, that's it. Choose a colour, add some Beckman reflection, and down here, enable the dielectric Fresnel. This will just make things look much, much nicer. Okay, so we haven't actually applied this texture. We've still got our old naff, rubbish, rubbery looking one. So I'm just going to stretch this up a bit so I get a bit more space. If you ever want to replace a material, rather than sitting there trying to drop it onto the object, there's an easier way. I want to replace my old car paint with a new car paint. Hold down the Alt key and then drag your new material on top of the old one, and it will eat it up and replace it. Hum. And that, let's put this back down, that should have improved how nice our car paint looks quite noticeably. So we've now got this nice slick reflection, it's catching this nice glimpse of light, it's looking much nicer. And in general, just go through and repeat this with most of your car materials. You don't have to do it for everything, just the bits that you really notice. So, for example, let's just leave this up here whilst we're doing materials. So glass. This glass, what is this? This does not look like glass. It looks like some weird pearlescent ball. Again, let's just make a new material. Let's keep it simple. We'll simply say the color is none. It obviously has transparency, so let's turn this on. And in transparency, we'll just set the preset to be glass. That's nice and straightforward. And then last of all, remember we got rid of that specular on the paint because it looked like a sort of rubbery finish. Well, we have the same thing on the glass here. There's a very slight milky finish on the material. In fact, let's just open this up and show you a bit more detail. It just has this sort of milkiness to it. So if we go down to reflectance, here we are, default specular, hit remove. That now cleans up the glass and it's much more transparent and crisp and clear. So again, let's eat up the old material and replace it. So hold down Alt, drag this new glass on top of the old one. And that should look much nicer. And basically just keep going through with all materials. Find the worst offenders. So the main visible parts of this car, I think, are going to be this black rubber trim, the alloys, maybe a quick thing in the headlights. We'll have a look. So let's see what's on this. Which of these is the rubber tire? If you're trying to work out which one's which, open the material, the one which you think it might be, and just quickly mess around with something. Turn on some color and see if it suddenly changes. And that will let you know, oh yeah, this is the material. So, yep, this one here is our tyres. So let's just make a better version. So a rubber tyre is not black. It's just very, very dark grey. Put a little bit of lightness in there. And it has a very, very soft sheen reflection on there. So in reflectance, lose this. Get rid of that. And we're going to put in another real proper Beckman reflection. Turn on the Fresnel setting again because this largely just makes everything look a bit more realistic. So again, dielectric because rubber isn't metal. And because this is right now a very shiny, slick, glossy reflection, I'm just going to crank up the roughness like 30-40%, just really, really high. And that's it. That's your rubber tire texture. So I can replace my new rubber tyre, hold down Alt, eat up the old one, hum. There we go. Now even our tyres have a nice bit of reflection on there. We can get a sense of the sky shining down on those tyres. But let's go ahead and do the same thing for these alloy wheels, which I'm going to guess is the rims. Again, let's have a quick play. Yep, that's the rims. Okay, new material. White is fine. Again, same in reflectance. Get rid of the specular. Add in a Beckman reflection, turn on the Fresnel setting, dielectric, and maybe add a little bit of roughness in case the reflection on these alloys isn't perfectly crisp. So maybe 5-10%, just a little bit of imperfection. But again, let's eat up the old material and put on our nice new shiny one. There you go, nice and shiny, nice slick reflection. So in a nutshell, just go through, repeat this for everything. I'm just going to try and get whatever this bit of black rubber is. So is it maybe the black plastic material here? Is that the culprit? Yes, it is. Right, so one last material. And I tell you what, the black plastic is not going to look that much different from the black rubber. So let's just duplicate this black rubber, copy and paste. Maybe tweak it a bit. I'd say maybe the reflection isn't quite so blurry. It's a little bit crisper. There we go. That'll be our black plastic. So let's eat up the old black plastic material with this. We've now got a nice bit of reflection on that black plastic. And that will do. I'll leave you to sort out the rest of the materials by yourself. So all that's really left here. So, you know, try to improve your road and your curb. Put a little bit of a curb around the edge, put a little step in the corner, just so that the road and the pavement don't look completely flat with one another. But let's look through our camera. Where did we hide that? Over here. Let's see what we get now. Let's hit render. Okay, so that car's looking much nicer. We've now got this nice, lovely reflection coming off the roof, off the windows, slightly shiny tyres. So that's looking nicer. The big thing you can do to improve how things look when they render, in your render settings, open those up. We've got a few bits and pieces. We've got some old global illumination, so maybe he was playing around with those. But let's just delete them, because I don't know what weird things he's set in there. And we're going to add a fresh one. Effects, global illumination. And my simple bit of advice, if you're not sure what you're doing with global illumination, this is, by the way, something which makes everything just look more realistic as far as the lighting is concerned. Light can now bounce off the surfaces. This sky we've got up in the sky will now cast light down, illuminate everything. Simple solution. Under presets, choose high diffuse depth. Interior preview, high diffuse depth. This just generically works for everything. So go with this one. You can't really go too wrong with it. And that will do. Anti-aliasing. Okay, that's already turned on. That's fine. So I'm not going to worry about much else. Maybe I might play around with the reflections just to speed up the renders. Under options, reflection depth. This is how many times light can bounce. And to be honest, once you've made the light bounce sort of 2 or 3 times, you don't really notice much after that. So if you want to save a bit of render time, knock the reflection depth down to just sort of 2 or 3. I'll do 3 to be safe, but it'll be faster than 5 was. Okay, let's give it another render, see what we get. Now, this will take a bit longer because we're now doing global illumination and it's got to calculate a lot more. So let's give that a moment whilst it just processes where the light's going to go. And what are we doing? So irradiance cache prepass. So I'm not expecting a render time much more than sort of 30 seconds, maybe a minute or so at most. But let's see. Okay, that's looking decent. Not too bad. Okay. There is one last thing we do need to generally do. Just I'll have a chat whilst this renders. We do need to add a sunlight. When we deleted Gus's physical sky, that also took with it the sun. So we do have light, our sky which we've wrapped around the scene, this object over here. This does cast light into the scene, but it's never detailed. It's never quite harsh and crisp like the sunlight would be. So it's good for general daylight lighting, but we're losing any sense of sunlight shining down. So one last thing we will need to do is shine a bit of sunlight down in from the top corner down into the scene essentially. So it's looking better, although we do need to fix a bit of texturing over here. Tell you what, let's quickly do that bit first, shall we? So this texture on the wall, it's all stretchy and smeary. Let's just select that object, find where it is, cube 1, okay, choose the texture, and a quick solution which works for most things, where it says projection UV mapping, just set it to cubic. Cubic mapping will just generically evenly put the texture around on the object. Okay, so let's go sort out our sunlight. And we're just going to keep this nice and straightforward. Up in your menu, watch out. I know there is an object called sun. Please don't use this. It looks terrible. Never, ever, 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 ever use sunlight. It's rubbish. Just go for a normal standard light. Okay, so all we're going to do with this, let's turn our camera off for a second. We're just going to take our light, have a look in our photo, and you see this big bright area we have in the sky over here. Well, the sun's roughly over there. So I'm just going to kind of roughly throw the sun up there. It doesn't matter exactly where it sits, so long as it's kind of in the right direction. But that's enough, really. Just make sure that it looks decent shining down on the car, which at that kind of angle, yeah, that's about all right. I'm happy with that. In terms of settings for this light, well, we'll give it a little bit of colour. We'll give it a slightly warm orange hint because it's supposed to be the sun. We'll give it some shadows. If you're ever a little bit lost as to which one to go for, just go for something like a nice soft shadow. You know, It's kind of hard to go wrong with those usually. And that's really it. Let's give it another test render. Actually, I tell you what, just before we do that, it's sometimes good to know where the shadows are going to go. So under options, turn on this enhanced OpenGL if you haven't already, but then go underneath and turn on shadows. We can now see roughly where the shadows are going to go. So I can now look at this before I render and think, maybe my shadows are a little bit too long. Maybe I'll raise the light up higher into the sky so the shadows are a bit shorter. So let's zoom out. And although I can't see the sun, it's selected. So I'm just going to click and drag my mouse up, and that will generally cause the sun to raise higher. That will have shortened the shadows so they're not quite so long and drawn out now. But yeah, we'll see what we get from that. So let's look through our camera, and we'll do a small test render first just to see how this generally looks. So let's just render this in the quarter view. See how it goes. Actually, just one other thing: speeding up your test renders in your render settings under anti-aliasing. Just turn it off. Set this to none. When you're doing your tests, you don't need to see nice, perfect, crisp, smooth images. You can just take a shortcut. So let's see how this goes. Works out the lights. La-di-da-di-da-di-da. And we get... Okay, so the sun's helping, but the shadow, well, we can't really see it, and I kind of suspect why. One slight downside of using soft shadows is that if the light is too far away from the thing it's supposed to be illuminating, the shadows get really, really soft. So in this case, it might just be more straightforward to either go for some hard, crisp, ray-traced shadows, or if you want to play around with the settings a bit, you can go for area. But this video is already running at 40 minutes, so I'm just going to go for the quick, easy option and go for hard. So let's do a hard shadow. Give it another quick little test. See if our shadows are landing in the right place this time. And do we have shadows? Yes, we do. Okay, cool. Right. So we've got some shadows being cast. We've got the colours looking better. So yeah, I think generally I'll sort of call it a day there then. So let's just turn our anti-aliasing back on for the final image. And that's it. So yeah, hopefully that's been useful. Hopefully this has helped Gus and anyone else who's watching this video. If you do have a request yourself, if you'd like me to help you with a project you're working on because you think, oh, how do I get this looking better? Drop me an email, contact@3dfluff.com, and maybe I'll make you a video. Okay, hope that's been useful. Here's the final render. Just save you a bit of render time there. Right, this has been Mash from 3D Fluff. All the best.